Hey everyone, hello. We've got a very changeable day here, so I hope it doesn't start raining before we finish this film because we're getting showers and clouds are coming and it's all over the place. And I'm just wandering the garden after a morning at the computer. Broke! Shoo! Get off that bed. And so I'm wandering the garden, checking the beds, and obviously there's weeds. This garden is chock-a-block full of weeds. And I'm coming along and I'm pulling them out. And I just noticed here in particular, we haven't quite finished the path yet, and there are weeds coming up in the path. And I'm thinking, I thought I would talk about weeds today because they're a bit of a nuisance in the beds, and you don't really see them in the path until they've really got hold. Like, look at these docks. There's docks and there's silverweed. And sometimes, you know, you can't just pull them out. There's lots of grass, there's horsetail. And so I thought today, well, let's talk about weeds and how can we control them and manage them. So as you know, for me, a lot of these weeds are just medicinal plants, so I don't see them as a problem. And I don't go over the top breaking my back trying to keep everything looking neat and tidy. But there are times when we do have to actually say, come on, lads, you shouldn't really be here in this spot. And sometimes they don't listen, so you've got to take action. So I think there's two types of places where I would actually consider doing something about the weeds. So in the veg beds, what I will do is pull mechanically using a hoe, using my hands, or I might try to suffocate them with a mulch, which could be sheep's wool or cardboard or wood chips or, you know, new compost. It could be anything. Just mulch them away so that they don't get any light. This bed is coming up full of poppies because they've obviously been in the environment since last year. But when I want to get rid of things that are on the path, if they don't pull out, I'm going to have to use something else. And I'm not going to mulch a path. So I'm going to show you some of the about 4 different types of homemade weed killer that you can use, because I personally would never, ever, ever use a purchased herbicide, which, to be honest, they should be called bio-cides because they kill life, not just weeds, they kill life. And I remember when I did my horticultural course years ago, we were taught how to use weed killers. It was part of the course, even though our teacher was an organic grower and she didn't advocate for weed killers, but she had to go through it all with us because some people might have wanted to use them. And when you look at the instructions for using glyphosate, really, it's impossible to ever use it under the correct, perfect conditions. So, for example, if you want glyphosate to work successfully, you have to be spraying at a temperature that's warm, getting warmer, up to about 25 degrees. So anything up to 25 degrees. If it's too hot, the plants won't take in the glyphosate. And if it's too cold, they won't take it in. So it just sits on the surface of the plant. And then if you get a heavy dew or you get rainfall, that's going to get washed off into the ground, into the soil. It could find its way to the roots of plants you want to keep. It could find its way into the water table or into bodies of water. You shouldn't spray when it's about to rain for that same purpose, that it will be washed off and will go into, water bodies. So in Ireland, it's always about to rain and it never really gets that hot. The other thing is, you've got to be so careful of drift, which means if you spray a biocide, I'm not even going to call it a herbicide because it's actually a biocide, and I'll tell you a bit more about that shortly. Say I'm spraying a biocide here. This breeze that we have today will make it drift. The tiny droplets will be carried along by the breeze and could be carried for miles and then dropped onto somebody else's garden, onto somebody else's plants, into somebody's little stream or well. And I think the percentage of, in America, I just saw a statistic the other day, I think it was 87% of all children's urine that was tested contained glyphosate. It is literally everywhere. Something like 94 million tons have been sold since 1974. So I don't think people realize just how pernicious and dangerous weed killer is. They just think it's another product from the garden centre. But it is actually, as I've said, and I will keep repeating, it's a biocide. So what does it do to us? Well, it's recognized by the World Health Organization, and they have a separate body called International Research for Cancer, something like that. And they recognize it as a carcinogen. And what it does when it gets into the human body is it can cause cancer. Recently in America, there was a school caretaker who sued because he ended up with non-Hodgkin lymphoma from having to spray for hours all over the school pitches and the school greenery to keep the weeds down. And he was awarded $289 million as compensation. Unfortunately, it was reduced to 39 million after the chemical company appealed. But there are tens of thousands of cases seeking compensation from the damage that these sprays have caused. And it doesn't just hurt us, we all know about colony collapse amongst the bees, but other pollinators can be harmed, and fish, rodents, invertebrates, the soil can be damaged, the water can be affected. So it's not just about being selfish and protecting humanity from these known carcinogens. It's about the environment. So the chemical company themselves recommend the temperature up to 25 degrees, I think 20 to 25 degrees centigrade. They recommend less is more. So don't overdo it. But who listens to that? I mean, if anyone says to me half a teaspoon, I'll say, oh, I'll just throw in a tablespoon. They say force 2 breeze. How do we, ordinary people, how do we measure force 2 breeze? What is a force 2 breeze? Today is not windy here, but it is very breezy. And then, of course, if a product tells you to don biohazard gear, it should make you think twice about using it. You know, you're supposed to protect your skin and eyes. You're not supposed to inhale when you're spraying. Doesn't that tell people something about the dangers of this product? I don't know. I mean, if you love your kids and you want them to have a nice little game of football on the lawn, don't be spraying these things where they're rolling and tumbling and playing. Likewise, your pets. So anyway, I'll put all this information in the box below and you can read it at leisure. But for now, I'm just going to show you different ways you can eliminate weeds without using harmful chemicals. And I'm just going to be talking about weeds on the paths. So I've got some equipment up here. not biohazard equipment because I don't need it. So first of all, before I tell you, I just want to clarify, there is no way on this earth, there is no possibility that I would ever, ever spray even any of this stuff onto a vegetable bed or onto a flower bed. These are weed killers solely for paths and patios and paving, because it is a bit awkward to get weeds out of your paving cracks. So first thing, boiling water. Boil a kettle, pour it onto your weeds, and that will do it. Number 2, lemon juice. Citric acid in the lemon juice will burn and kill your weeds. So again, you can just dab a spot of lemon juice onto the weeds. Very simple. You can use fresh lemons or you can use this cheap stuff, which I wouldn't actually use for human consumption, but I use it for house cleaning. So number 3, you could just sprinkle some ordinary table salt. I never use this for our human consumption, but I use it for house cleaning. You can just sprinkle salt and it will burn your weeds. You know, it doesn't maybe work as quickly. It may not be as deadly, but it will keep control of the weeds in your paths. And then the final thing, which is the most lethal, is to make a spray using vinegar, some lemon juice, some salt, and a little bit of washing up liquid. In glyphosate, which is toxic already, there are other products in that chemical mix, and they're called adjuvants, which make the toxins go straight into the plant's membrane to kill it off. And there are also surfactants. That's what the washing up liquid is. It's something sticky to make the glyphosate stick onto the plant, to give it time to get inside the plant's cells to kill it off. Unfortunately, in that kind of weed killer, that chemical weed killer, it's the sum of the parts that make it more toxic. They work synergistically, and so these surfactants can often make the glyphosate, which is already toxic, they can make it even more toxic. So it's not just a question of glyphosate, it's a question of all the other ingredients working synergistically. Now, I'm telling you that the vinegar and salt and the lemon juice are all natural, therefore, they're harmless. Of course they're not harmless. They're going to kill off the weeds on the paths. So just bear that in mind. If it drifts, it's not really going to do any harm. If you inhale a bit of vinegar, it's not going to do any harm. It's not really going to do any harm to any creatures, but it will damage your soil and it will harm your plants if you use a lot of this on the soil. But I'm not using it on soil. I'm only using it on the path. And that's only when I can't pull them out or I'm feeling particularly bothered about them. And I'm only actually doing this now as a demonstration because I'd probably just, I'd end up just not seeing them because I'm not usually a weed killing person. I just put a bit of a squeeze of lemon juice in there and about a couple of tablespoons of, I'll put the recipe below with the amounts. And then another ingredient is clove bud oil. Clove oil is also something that I might put all of that in actually because it's not a full bottle. So I'm just going to give this little swirl around because we want the salt to dissolve in the vinegar and the lemon juice. Yeah, it seems to have disappeared now. So I have roughly half a gallon of vinegar, half a cup of salt, a couple of tablespoons of washing up liquid or dish liquid, as some people call it. And then I've got a dash of lemon juice and clove oil. And this will be quite a strong weed killer solely for pats. So using a little spray like this, I can be really focused on where I want to spray. So even though there are weeds there, it's kind of a little grassy verge and I don't want to spoil that. So these are on the path. So I can be very direct. I can smell the clove bud oil. So I think this is going to be really effective. So I can pull these out. And if I feel I've left anything behind, I can just give it a spray. So I know people like convenience, and it's probably so easy to just buy a product in the shop, throw it around. But if you really care about your family and your own health, and you care about the environment, and you care about the pollinators, one of the things, if the weather conditions are not right, and the glyphosate just sits on the surface of a plant, pollinators might come and visit that plant. Small mammals and small creatures might brush past the plant. And there is an argument, of course, that it's not that something is toxic, it's the dose that counts. And so, yes, some people will argue that glyphosate, the dose is so low, it's not going to harm humans. But then you have to think of the cumulative effect. You have to think of the drift. You have to think of the weather conditions, which means it could end up in the soil and in the waterways. There is never the perfect weather conditions, the perfect day, really, certainly not here where I live, to be spraying this stuff. And if the company who makes it says, do not spray near flowers in bloom because it will harm them. Do not spray when bees are foraging. Bees are foraging from February, March onwards. Do not spray near waterways, and do not spray unless you have the perfect weather conditions. When are you supposed to use these bio-cides? There isn't a right time. So even though this is going to kill your weeds, it's not going to harm anything else, providing you don't use it on soil. And I would never put anything where I'm growing food other than organic mulches, organic soil replenishers, and things of that nature. So you may have to do a little bit of physical weeding. If it doesn't come out, use this if you can't get it out. So I suppose the final message from me is that I don't really agree with killing anything, but all of the weeds on this path, they're multiplying, they're everywhere else in this garden. So I don't feel too bad because Lol has put a lot of work into these paths and I want them to remain useful. The more weeds we have on the paths, the less use they are, because they will eventually, those weeds will break down, create soil, the path will be lost, and we'll end up just with mud again. So in a rare occasion, such as a path or a patio or paving, I would use something like this. But otherwise, we just have to live and let live. And remember, whatever we do in one incident can, Brock, come away from that bed. Good boy. Come on. Good boy. So whatever we may do, whatever little thing, everything has a ripple effect. So think of the drift. That is the most important, because it can travel for miles. Good boy. Hey. I know of some people who will use shamanic techniques, and they will journey to plants and ask them to please not grow on the paths, for example, and they end up with lovely clear paths. So there's lots of things we can do, and I think we always must choose the way that does least harm. And not just to the plants, but to the environment. Because we are keeping bees as well, you know. And, you know, I know people who are working professionally and have to use weed killers, and their health is suffering. So just give it some thought. And please try to stop spraying weed killers, glyphosate, herbicides. They're not herbicides, they're bio-cides. But enough of that now. I just want to tell you about 2 places I'll be working at this summer. 17th of June out in East Galway at the Bull on Ark to do a small afternoon workshop on how to find your plant ally. And then at the end of July, I'll be at Studio Fassa running a lovely workshop over the weekend to celebrate Lunasa. So I'll put the details of that below as well. So I'm going to continue with this now before the rain comes, just because I don't want to get wet, not because it's going to have any adverse effects on this vinegar and salt. So I hope you have a wonderful weekend gardening, and wishing you all the best for good weather. And see you next week. I hope you enjoyed today's film. If you did, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. And have a look at the website danusirishherbgarden.com for more information about us and about the herbal medicine courses I offer and the Wise Woman Way training. And if you go to the shop, you can find the books, the weed handbooks and other herbal goodies. And remember, we put a new film out every Sunday. So looking forward to seeing you next week.